How do you execute at pace? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode of the SPS podcast. And I will also be sharing with you a 3-step process that is going to make executing at pace very effective for you. Let's jump into the intro. Welcome to the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. Unlocking the secrets of self-performance so you can improve mentally, emotionally, and physically. The goal of this podcast is to help you create more freedom of time, money, and purpose. My name is Stephen, and I am your host. I believe there is always an easier way, and I am here to help you find it. Hello, and welcome to episode 15. Episode 15, yes. Exciting times. Executing at pace. I am following my own advice. I am executing at pace when it comes to this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the first 14 episodes. If you haven't, please go to your local podcast distributor and download them all now and listen to them. But yes, as I said, in this episode, we're going to be talking about executing at pace. And like I always do, at the start of all my episodes, I like to frame what we're talking about with a quote. And this one comes from Sue Grafton, and it's a great one. Ideas are easy, but it's the execution of ideas that really separates the sheep from the goats. I love this quote because we all know what GOAT stands for. We're not talking about a goat in a field or on a side of a mountain with a little beard bleating away into the abyss on a cold winter's day in some Scandinavian country. We're talking about goats, the greatest of all time. Goats, your Lionel Messi's, your Ronaldo's, your Ayrton Senna's, your Nadal's, your Usain Bolt's, your Elon Musk's, your Richard Branson's, the goats, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Brady, boo. I know a lot of people don't like Tom Brady, but anyway, he was a goat. He's the goat of quarterbacks in the NFL. The greatest of all time, the goats. And execution is what separates the mere sheep, the mere sheeple from the goats. And that's what we're going to be talking about here, because it's execution that can take you from being a sheep to being the greatest of all time in your life. Because at the end of the day, you are your only competition. You have been a sheep at some part in your life, and it's up to you to take whatever you've done so far and turn yourself into the goat, the greatest of all time when it comes to what you've previously done in your life. So don't compare yourself to other people. Don't compare yourself to all those goats that I just mentioned at the start of the episode. Just compare yourself to your previous self and become the GOAT of you, the greatest of all time, the greatest version of you possible. And I'm going to help you do that in this podcast. Something that takes many people a long time to learn, including me, yes, is that you've got to execute at pace. I've learned this recently over the last number of years, especially in the last 18 months to 2 years going full-time as an entrepreneur. You get an idea, you've got to go after it. You've got to get that idea done. You've got to execute at pace because it allows you to get feedback much faster. You can pivot, you can adjust, you can go again. Way too many people have made up excuses in their minds why things won't work and never validate them. They never put them out into the world to let the market decide. But I've got to ask you this question. When was the last time an idea in your mind paid your bills? Yeah, never. Ideas don't pay bills. Execution and building something and creating something and putting something out into the world, that's what pays bills. That's what builds connections and networks for you. You've got to put content out into the world and let the market decide what the value is of that work. And that is where this 3-step process that I'm going to show you in this episode is going to come in and help you. What is this 3-step process? Well, it's called test, learn, adapt. And then you just keep repeating it. How do you execute at pace? Well, it's helpful to have several mental models that will help you take action. And this one I have found extremely helpful in my life. This test, learn, adapt. Seeing everything as a test, learning from that test, adapting, and then testing again. A simple 3-step loop you can use to keep executing and keep creating results. Test. That's the first step. Everything is a test. Everything is a test. That is a common idea that you see in startups, in the tech world. Just manufacturing, just everything's a test. Let's not get too attached to a result. Let's just test it and see what happens. One of the most critical parts of a success journey is seeing everything, absolutely everything, as a test. I cannot stress that enough. That's why I'm probably repeating myself a little bit. Your pride or your ego might take failure and defeat more personally when you're first starting out. It happens. It does happen. It's happened to me. It happens to everybody. When you first start putting yourself out there, your ego and your pride will get hurt if you don't get the results that you're looking for. It's key to get over this quickly and to see everything as a test and one giant feedback loop. Also, it's key not to start doing things and expecting that you do something once and it's going to change your life. That's not usually how success happens. Yeah, you might buy a lottery card, you scratch it, boom, you win $1 million. But that's not really how success works. It's about testing, and coming back to it over and over again. The second step, the second one is learning. Albert Einstein once said, "It's not that I'm so smart, but I stay with the questions much longer." It's brilliant. He stays with the question much longer. He stays in the testing and the learning much longer than most people. Most people try something once, they test it, they don't get good results, they walk away from it. But what we have to be doing here is testing and then learning and then sitting with that learning and understanding it. Never stop learning, never stop putting work out there. When you put content or you do work or you complete a project, look for the wins, look for the areas you could improve. Working like this gives you ideas, it fuels you, it allows you to actually stack your wins, stack your tests. You tap into the power of continuous improvement and momentum when you learn. When you test and then you look at that test as a learning opportunity, you can learn so much and it will give you so many more ideas than looking at it and being like, well, it didn't work out, that didn't work, that was stupid, and then completely forgetting about it. When I used to work in corporate, one of the big things that we used to do at the end of a project, we do a debrief. And the idea of the debrief was to come up with a number of points of how the project could have gone smoother the next time. Now, I know that I got so fed up in that last corporate job that I had, because every time we started a similar project, we never went back and looked at the debrief. So the learning part was not getting implemented. We were doing the learning part because it was a tick box exercise at the end of the process, the end of the project. You know, if you're a project manager, you might know this, you might relate to this. You know, part of that tick box exercise to finish off a project is to do a debrief, is to pull the learnings together. But every time we started a new project, we didn't go back to the old ones and go, well, what did we learn? What can we test and adapt for the new one? And that's a really frustrating thing to see repeatedly over and over again when you're working as a project manager, as you're working in a large corporation. You're like, hey, we're not learning here. And then when you don't learn, it doesn't allow you to adapt. And that's the third step here. So we've got our testing, we've got our learning, and now we're adapting. And I think George Bernard Shaw said, those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. It's a brilliant quote. It's a brilliant quote. Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. If you're repeating the same work and expecting different results, you're not changing. You're not going to be able to improve your results. And that's why when you do the test, you do the learning, you get that feedback, you've got to adapt and change what you're doing to see if you can improve your results. The final part of this whole process is adaptation. You can't stand still. Take what you've learned from your test and pivot with what you think might be an improvement. It's pretty straightforward. You won't always get positive results, and that's what I'm trying to say here. The process is often more important than the results, because you can have a shit process, you can be awful, and the odd time you can actually get a great result. So you might keep repeating a shit process and you're like, well, why didn't that work again? Well, it's because your process was shit and you fluked it. You just got lucky as randomness happened. But when you have a good process, when you have this test, learn, adapt, and you detach emotionally, you detach from arbitrary results, and you go with this process and you execute at pace and you set it up as a feedback loop, you will get results. You will get results with this. But the good thing about looking at it as a test is you don't care if those results are negative or positive, because you're always going to be learning and adapting from them, which allows you to keep refining your processes and your systems. If you are doing something in a way and it's getting you positive results and you change it and you get worse results, you can go back to your original and see whether that brings the results back up, or you can pivot again and see whether you get even more results. But if you don't have a system like this, test, learn, adapt, if you don't have a process or a mental model like this that allows you to execute and allows you to move on things quickly, you will struggle to grow. You will sit on the sidelines. Like I said earlier, you'll have lots of these ideas, but ideas don't pay the bills. If you want to be the greatest of all time in your life, if you want to be the GOAT in your life, if you want to be the best version of you, you need to start installing little mental models like this in your life where you're able to take action very quickly, execute on your ideas, and just get them out into the world, get that feedback, and grow, grow, grow. So my request for you, after listening to the 15th episode of the SPS podcast, after joining me for this episode on how to execute at a faster pace, my request is go out and test, learn, and adapt your way to becoming the GOAT in your life. Thanks very much for joining me for this episode of the SPS podcast. I deeply appreciate it. If you want to hit me up on my socials, at Steve Timoney, that's on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. That's STEVETIMONEY. Let me know what you think of the podcast. Also, you can hit me up on my website, which is STEPHENTIMONEY.com, StephenTimoney.com, going by my full name on my website and my shorter name on my socials. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. I hope you got a lot out of test, learn, adapt, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode. Make it a good one.